Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Emerging Brands Podcast with Kelly Bennett. I am a brand strategist, and what I love to do is hear the behind the scenes, founder stories, brand stories of cool emerging brands. Today, we have Cat Myers, founder and CEO of Head South, on the show. And Cat, thank you so much for being here.
Kelly, thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. When we spoke prior to recording, I was so inspired, and your story really sparked a lot of creative ideas on my end of the street. So I know that everyone listening will definitely take away some great information and sources of inspo. So to dive into it, could you give us a little behind the scenes of your brand story, of why you started the brand, your background? I love also the really massive pivot that you took also to start your brand. So could you dive into all of that juicy stuff?
Sure. Yeah. Ooh, a big dive.
Yes.
Luckily, I was a swimmer, a competitive swimmer as a child. So
Love
I'm
that.
ready to dive. I'm ready to dive in. So yeah, we'll start actually there. So when I was in high school, I was really frustrated with sex education and what was offered. I went from a Catholic school as a child and then transitioned to a public high school. And neither of these institutions provided the information that I was seeking. So around 16, 17, when I was ready to start having sex, I started to research for myself and for my friends. And so I started going to Barnes and Nobles, Walden Books, and the library, and collecting as much information as I could around pleasure, about oral sex, things that like we weren't actually instructed on. We were pretty much given information about like preventing pregnancy and preventing STIs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about it. And then like junior high was more about like the, going through puberty.
Yes.
Right. And so that was pretty much it. And so there was nothing about pleasure, nothing about consent. There was no comprehensive sex education. And so I was finding myself doing a lot of that. And I was really passionate. And I think back now, and I probably would have become a sex therapist had I known that that was a path one could take. And instead, I took a path of art and painting and illustration. And then I got into cosmetology, became a hairdresser, and then started working in hair care. So I've worked in hair care with brands for a little over a decade.
Amazing.
And so, yep. And so I was working with a brand called Hair Story. I was a producer, so creating content, working with the brand all the way through from like ideas on products through, working with models and production and photo shoots and collaborating with publications like Refinery 29, Teen Vogue. So I was in all of those little roles and like
So
worked with all
cool.
those different people. Yeah. And that was a lot of fun. That was around 2016. And then I left Hair Story and started consulting. And I was developing over the course of 5 years another hair care brand with a business partner. And part of their company got sold, and so they got locked into a non-compete. And so that's the pivot you mentioned.
Yes.
It was like this crazy point where I woke up and was like, what am I going to do? And I had been thinking about sex education, sex therapy, wanting to maybe even go back to school to study that. And I realized that I didn't want to give up the past 10 years and all of this learning. And I worked very closely with Michael Gordon, who was the founder of Bumble Mumble and Hair Story. And we were working on this new brand together. And so I had learned so much about building a brand and all of the different parts of it, from manufacturing, supply chain, all the way through to customers and working with retailers. And so I literally woke up from a dream about lube and was like, oh, that's the link. That's what I could do. I can take this and all of this knowledge and wisdom that I have and intuition for building a brand and bring in my passion for sex education through lubes and sexual wellness. So kind of combining two things that I'm very, very passionate about.
So you had this dream about lube and you're like, okay, this is it. This is the meat in the middle. This is how I can merge my passion, my insight, my experience. So walk us through a little bit from having that dream to launching the brand?
Yeah. So that was exactly 2 years ago. I had been in
Wow.
London. Yeah, I was in London in 2021, and we were talking to investors about the hair care brand when all of this transpired with the non-compete. And so then I returned, and we were scheduled to speak with a lawyer, and that's when I had the dream about the lube. And then I had already had the Head South name trademarked for Michael, who was my partner at the time. He had all these ideas when we were at Hair Story. So I started having my trademark lawyer trademark all of these different brands and ideas, and really incredible things that he was, coming up with over decades of time. And so the Head South
Wow.
name actually came from, he lived in South Africa in the 70s, and there was a denim brand, and it was called Head South. And so he loved the name and was like, oh, someday it would be cool to do a sunscreen brand. And so that was essentially what Head South originally was it was supposed to be a sunscreen brand heading south for winter kind of idea,
Right.
and like travel skincare. And so it never happened. And so it was just sitting on the shelf. And so I called Michael up and I was like, hey, the hair care thing's not happening. I actually want to do sexual wellness. Can I use the name? And he was like, absolutely. And so I called my lawyer right after. She extended the filing and kind of changed the ownership. And then that got the ball rolling. And then that was October into November. November, I went to an event for founders in beauty out in LA, and I met a supply chain consultant. And so she was helpful in connecting me and helping me find my manufacturer for the lubes. So by January, we had like secured a manufacturer. It was a little bit of a wild goose chase with finding that manufacturer, because
Right.
it wasn't the same. I naively thought like, oh, the people that I've worked with over the years doing hair care can do this. It doesn't actually work that way. And so we had to kind of do a needle in a hay, and I was like calling all these different manufacturers, and she had found this business out in LA, and I so appreciate them, and I'm really excited to have been working with them and found them so quickly and kind of develop this relationship with them. And the founder of that company has been in the industry, the sexual wellness industry, for about 30 to 40 years. So he has been really integral in like mentoring me
Wow.
as well. Yeah.
What an amazing connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it all kind of started like exactly that, like coming together very quickly and organically. And I had lots of different interactions like that, where like meeting people, and then all of a sudden it kind of snowballed into like, connecting people. And I have to say that's something I really, really appreciate in these 2 years of doing this, is the generosity of all of the people I've come across. Even like beauty, like my lawyer, so not my trademark lawyer who I've been working with for a long time, but my corporate lawyer, who helped me kind of establish some of the paperwork and LLC information. That was introduced to me through another female founder who I've known for many, many years, who has a shower cap brand. So it's kind of like this really interesting experience of like networking and people being so generous and offering their help or pointing me in the right direction. And so I think that's in a way how a lot of this had come together pretty quickly for me. I mean, to me, it feels like a very quick turnover of 2 years
Right.
from a dream to launching product. For other people, it might not be. And, it's something that I've been bootstrapping this, and also with some help from family and close friends to kind of make this all happen. So for me, it's like pretty incredible and pretty quick.
Absolutely. Literally, to go from a dream to launch in 2 years is incredible. So
Thank you.
absolutely. I second that. So let me ask you this, because I think what you just touched upon is really important, but also a pain point for a lot of emerging brand founders, is putting yourself out there and saying, hey, this is what I'm working on. I don't have a product yet. I don't have a manufacturer yet. I have a name. I have a concept. What gave you the courage to even go in those rooms and put yourself out there like that so you could connect with the right next person? What advice would you give someone who's like nervous of even just that step alone?
Yeah, I think I'm probably an expert on that because I'm an introvert. I would categorize myself as someone who gets very shy, and
Same.
yeah.
Same.
And so this is a great question, because I feel like I would love this advice for myself.
Yeah.
I think, and it's something that like I had to, and I still kind of work through. I'm still working through holding that title of founder, because it's something like I have predominantly done supporting the founder. I've always championed a founder and worked for a brand and that I believe in, and work for people that I believe in. And so then to have it be just me. I don't have a co-founder. You know, I've been advised by people of like, oh, maybe you should have a co-founder, or for a lot of different reasons. And so
Right.
it's one of those things of like, oh wow, I'm so not used to having this responsibility, having this role. I'm also not the person that feels confident and comfortable in a space and holding people's attention in that way of like, listen to me kind of energy,
Right.
which I don't, it's not natural for me. And so it's something I've kind of had to hone in on and work through. And luckily, Michael, who is my mentor, is also a shy person. And it was interesting to watch and learn that like you don't have to be the loudest person in the room. And I think when you speak authentically and clearly, like you have, that to me is really important. Like I had, whether I had money, funding, whether I had the products already developed, whether it's just an idea, whatever it was, like I had a very clear vision of what I wanted. And I have a clear vision of who I want to be in that role. So even if I'm like still fumbling and trying to figure it all out, it's like
Right.
I know when I kind of like sit and get quiet, this is what feels right. So like knowing my intuition and then speaking from that place is my best advice for anybody. Is like, I think there's so many people that offer great advice. We have so like that's something I think was so integral or important for me, is having mentors and people that I can call, but also knowing that like sometimes it's just about sitting and listening to yourself, and like it's in your gut, and like you don't need the validation, you don't need all of the cooks in the kitchen. And that's kind of why we set out to do this as entrepreneurs, or like as founders, is sometimes like you want to be the head chef. And so it's, you have to kind of embody that and take on that role and envision that for yourself and kind of hold true to that. And then
I
everything else
love
is
that you
just,
said that. I really do, because I think that so many founders who, exactly what you just said, this is their first time stepping into that founder role,
mm-hmm.
can feel all the feelings. And most of the time, the loudest feelings of that is, who do you think you are? You don't know enough. You don't have enough information, needing that validation, not seeing themselves as a founder yet either. So I think you just touched upon such an important piece of listening to your own intuition, getting quiet with yourself. And what it sounds like is, because you have such a clear vision of where you want to go, you're able to trust yourself in the process of taking that right next step, or side step or back step, or whatever the step may be, right? We know it's not a linear process, but it sounds like that's a big part of how you're stepping into this role of founder and CEO.
Yep. And then using that information, like the insight from within, to then communicate. I mean, that works in business, that works in intimacy. Like if you're
Right.
wanting to, work through some things, or, introduce things into the bedroom, it's kind of like you have to hone in on what your needs are to then communicate that to your partners or partners, it's
Yeah.
so it's, it all kind of translates
I've
from
never heard
business
that
to the bedroom.
correlation, but I'm here for it. Okay,
Yeah.
I could follow that. So let's go back to lube and the products that you're releasing. What, because I really liked how you described it to me, and the way that you look at this product category. So could you tell us a little bit more about what the product actually is and what you're
Mhm.
doing differently within your industry?
Yeah. The products are intimacy serums. So there's two intimacy serums, one massage oil. And so the two intimacy serums, one of them is a water base, the other one is a silicone base. And the massage oil, exactly that, it's a massage oil. So it's three products. They're a menage a trois. You can order them all together as a bundle, or you can order them separately. And I think what differentiates this right now on the market is that it's a refillable concept. And so
Oh,
you
okay.
receive a glass vessel that you keep. And I wanted the design to look like beauty and skincare, rather than like something that people would stash away in their bedside table or hide or put away. And so I wanted it, like if it was on your nightstand, to look just like your, night oil or night cream or any kind of beauty product that you might leave out. And it's refillable. We use a plastic tube to fill the glass container. You keep the glass container over time, and recycle the plastic tube. And so that's essentially the concept
Right.
that kind of differentiates us. And so I wanted to kind of bring in, sustainability as sexy.
Yes.
Um, and I think that it's a step in the direction. I don't think it's a solution. There's, bigger solutions needed to be found, but it's kind of, what can I do? I kind of also, to your question of like, as a founder, how do I approach these things? It's like um, looking at things as to what you can do as an individual. How can you be responsible? And like, if I'm going to create a brand, I kind of try to be as intentional as possible within the means and limitations that I have, both with funding as well as access to manufacturing and product and packaging. So just trying to do what I can in the best way that I can, or at least with this concept, it's introducing refillability into a category that it hasn't been yet, and kind of working from there,
Right.
upgrading the packaging, seeing what works, what doesn't work. It's kind of I actually enjoy that part of the process of like, this
I
is
think
like unknown territory.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important piece to share, that you're starting here. You'll see how you could grow and evolve, and giving yourself the permission to start here with what you have access to, what you can deliver on, what you can be consistent with, and feel good about the product and the brand experience you're delivering to consumers, and then building from there. And I think that transparency alone really engages with your ideal audience. And I feel like we have a similar audience of like, they would rather know your intentions and support you now and grow with you, because they're really bought into who you are, what your vision is, what's the intention behind the product, and also share feedback so you can develop and grow and evolve with your consumers. And I love that approach. I love that brand strategy.
I appreciate that. And exactly that. And to put it out into the world, and then with the hope of like, hey, I might not even know that there's certain packaging coming on the market that's innovative and can kind of be complementary to what we're producing, and kind of work as an upgrade for our packaging. So that's absolutely like
Totally.
coming out with it not being like the grand vision that's in my mind of how I want my brand to function and the products to function, or to be packaged. But yeah, to be transparent, and like, I have a vision of where this can go in the future, and I'm excited and want to work with our audience on how to improve this and how to make it better. And
Which I totally dig. And then the other part of your brand strategy that I really love, and it's something similar that you touched. I remember when we were talked first, you talked about it. And then a brand strategy I'm working on currently, we're doing a similar approach of starting with a podcast.
yes, yeah.
And so could you give us a little bit of how you started your podcast and how this is now essentially is going to help launch the product line? Because I, again, love that strategy.
Yeah, that came to me last summer, when I was starting to kind of work through like developing the products and thinking about my own experiences. I mean, one thing I will say for founders, I don't know if it applies to other types of industry, but working within sexual wellness, like, it had me evaluate my personal relationships, my relationship to sex and pleasure. It's kind of shifted, and I've had to do a lot of deep diving for myself and kind of exploring and understanding. And so I realized when I was in the process of floating around, living in Pennsylvania, going to Brooklyn and New York, and recognizing like, oh, and seeing doctors in Pennsylvania when I had, for 10 years been seeing doctors in New York. And I was like, oh, I had so much access to a really amazing healthcare team when I was living in New York. And I really appreciated my OBGYN and my primary care physician, understanding that I also wanted to take a holistic approach, and respecting that I wanted to work with like a naturopath, as well as a Chinese medicine practitioner, and a natural dermatologist. And so this team of women doctors, there was 5 or 6 of them, all understood my vision of like how I wanted to take care of myself. And I was so lucky and appreciative that they were willing to work together and communicate. They weren't in the same networks, but they were willing to like work through me and share information and kind of come up with plans to resolve issues. Like, I was dealing with endometriosis. I had surgery, a procedure to remove polyps on my and cysts on my ovaries.
Oh,
I was
wow.
dealing with a lot of health issues down there. And so
Right.
to have this team of women completely understand, when in my 20s, I had a male gynecologist who just kept trying to put me on birth control and wouldn't listen to me. And so to find like these 5 women who all work together, long story short, that then became like my realization of like, oh, I want to share this with people. I want to talk to these women, these doctors, these experts, and share this with people, because people might not know that this type of care is available, or that like one doctor might actually be willing to work with another doctor to kind of create a healthcare plan,
Right.
preventative plan, or a healing plan. And so that's where it started. So the first person I interviewed was my Chinese medicine practitioner, and then I started interviewing all the, like, my gynecologist I had interviewed, and so working with all of these different medical professionals, and then started going into, like, I worked with a sexual confidant who's somewhat like a sex therapist, a little bit different, using hypnotherapy, and she's a woman that I've known for 10 years and had worked with. And so, yeah, just finding people in my life as the start of the podcast to help educate, destigmatize things around sexual health as well as relational wellness, and then started branching out and reaching out to people I didn't know and interviewing and reading their books, and connecting with them through Instagram. And the enthusiasm to be on the podcast has been really wonderful, and the support around the podcast. And I've had like moments where I'm like walking down the street in New York and people are like, hey, listen to your podcast and that episode about, and I'm like, oh, wow. Like,
Cool is that?
that is so cool. And it's like, that's exactly the intention behind it. And so while the podcast and the products are, I look at them as siblings,
Mm-hmm.
I don't ever want the podcast to be about selling Head South products. And so it's not a conflict for me to interview somebody else who has a sexual wellness brand. To me, it's like there is so much room and space and information
Yep.
that needs to be shared. And so I kind of separated them slightly. They share the same Instagram account, but I have a separate website. I wanted it to be a space where people can share their information, their knowledge, their experiences, and it didn't have to be about necessarily my product being like the framing of it. If people want to talk about other lubes or other products that would be considered a competitor to Head South, I'm more than happy. Like, I want to hear about it. Like, I want to try it. That's cool. Like, I want to interview that founder.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
yeah,
I think
that's my
that
approach.
speaks volumes to you as well, as far as being more collaborative and
Mm-hmm.
listening. And I think your approach is just more of the new gen of founders of, cool, you do something similar. Awesome. I would love to get coffee with you or have you on my podcast. And just the other day, someone hit me up and said, I love what you do. How did you start this business? And I just gave her voice notes. I was like, oh, hey, so this is how I started. This is how it works. This is how I partner with certain other, industry professionals. And she wrote me back. She's like, I can't believe you actually answered that question. I was like, yeah, of course. If you are inspired by what I'm doing, I would rather help you and give you some insight versus feeling like I have to gatekeep my business, right? So I
Absolutely.
love that approach, and I just feel like that's just the new vibe,
Yep.
it's so, life is even better with that energy because you're just focusing on what you bring to the table,
Mm-hmm.
and what you bring is endlessly you and unique. And I think that also touches upon that inner work that you're doing as a founder to show up in that way.
Yeah, totally. I think the generosity of spirit that I've received, so like,
Mhm.
how people have pointed me in the right direction, like, why wouldn't I
Totally.
do the same? And I think, I don't know, maybe it is the vibe of where industry is going, whether it's beauty, whether hair care, skincare, um, consumer packaged goods, or sexual wellness. But the past 2 years of doing this, I have felt so much warmth and generosity and support from other brands, from other founders. And I think that's so incredible. And like, people that would normally be considered competitors in, history of time, and Pepsi, Coke, it's like
Right.
people, people, I think there's an understanding too that there's so many people, and there's, there is oversaturation in certain markets, but I also feel like there's so many people that certain things might speak to an individual. And so
Right.
it's okay to have a few options on the shelf, because one product might appeal to this person, and another product or a podcast or whatever that brand brings to the table might speak to another. And so there's so much room And so I think it's better to kind of view it that way versus viewing it in like, I have to win, or like we have to be the best of everybody. It's like, well, we're the best for somebody.
Right. Ooh,
Right.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
That's a good mantra.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good mantra. And I think also is a much more encouraging way of looking at it while you're building a business, especially in the early years. And especially when you have the vision, you have some steps, but it's still not fully there yet. That's a really good reminder. One last thing, most important question: how can people now buy your products?
So starting October 24th, Tuesday, October 24th, we'll be launching online. And so you can find us at
Amazing.
headsouth.world is the website. And headsouth.world is also our Instagram and TikTok.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
From a
Yeah, I'm really
dream to
excited.
2 years of launch is really remarkable. And I appreciate your generosity of sharing your story, your strategy, what you're doing differently in your industry, and the inner work you've done as a founder, because I know that's going to inspire so many others. So thank you so much, Kat.
Thanks, Kelly.
You're so welcome. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.